The June 21 Ekiti governorship election might have come and gone, but the memory still lingers. Some say it's a remarkable improvement on INEC performance in the Anambra election, as well as celebrating the spirit of sportsmanship displayed by the incumbent governor, Kayode Ifeanyi. At least for the first time in our Fourth Republic, many thought we would have an electoral process that won't end in the court. But on the contrary, the All Progressives Congress is heading to the court, challenging some constitutional breaches. On the show this week, we'll be discussing how these alleged breaches impact on the results of the Ekiti election. I am Nifemi Oguntoye, and you're watching Judiciary Today. Bosun Oshifora, thanks for joining us on Judiciary Today.
Thank you very much.
The APC Publicity Secretary, Lai Mohammed, said in a media conference after the Ekiti election that election is a process, not an event. That what happens on election day is only a vital part of the process. Now, from a legal point of view, what extent does a process affect an event in the case of an election?
You know, once things like that happen, politicians will have one thing or the other to say. You hear all kinds of nomenclatures and all that. Basically, the electoral law is there. The provisions are very clear. And once there is substantial compliance with the process by the body that is supposed to administer everything, then it's okay.
How do you define substantial?
Substantial, well, even if you look at the claim, I don't know, I don't want to preempt you, but I know we will still get into the claim. But I mean, the election, as far as what we know, I mean, talking from the social point of view now, normally if the people are aggrieved, you would have seen protests here and there. We never saw anything like that. The people seem satisfied. Even the incumbent has congratulated the winner. So, well, we can say that, well, so far, very unlike elections we've seen or witnessed in some other states in Nigeria, this has gone very well.
Are you saying categorically that if law was broken before and after the election, as long as nothing happens during election day, the credibility is not questionable in the court of law?
Well, what you take to the electoral tribunal has to do with whether there was rigging, whether ballot boxes
during
were not
the
there
election,
on time, everything that happened on the day of election. All these ancillary claims are just, I mean, you expect politicians to talk. They will say something. They are incumbent. They can't just concede defeat like that and go and sit down without, you know, raising dust.
The incumbent governor, shortly after the announcement of the result, conceded defeat and congratulated the governor-elect. Does that in any way hinder the chances of the APC in the court?
No, not at all. In fact, let's start from what he has done. What the gentleman did is novel. Very unlike what we used to see in Nigeria. They announced the result and he came out and said, conceded defeat, congratulated the winner. For me, he's a hero of the election. But even if he has some misgivings about whatever happened, yes, he knows where to go. For that day, he has, I mean, for peace. If you look at his speech, he said if this is what the people want, fine. That they should put the state ahead instead of, you know, personal interests. So that, for me, is novel. But that doesn't stop him from going to court. The fact that he considered defeat, if he feels, you know, one of the things they said, I read Lai Mohammed's comment, and he said that they have a panel of inquiry, that they are still looking into this thing, that once they submit and they have substantial ground to go to court, they will go to court. The court is the common man's hope. And if you feel aggrieved, there's no point fighting. He has taken the gentleman's position, then you can always go to court. That you consider defeat or congratulated someone that INEC said is the winner is good. I mean, what should he do? Raise his supporters and start fighting? In other climes, I mean, we saw Sarkozy. He was an incumbent president of France. He lost an election. He gathered all his supporters and told them that don't worry, we'll put France forward. We saw when Bush and Al Gore had their own, even Al Gore came out, everybody saw that, everybody knew that there was something wrong with the election. But Al Gore said we will put America's interest forward. I think this is what he has done. Afterwards, Al Gore went to court. But, you don't find, I guess they withdrew much after, but at the end of the day, it's the interest of the state that counts. But that doesn't stop him from going to court.
Prior to the election proper, the APC started crying foul when some of the governors were not allowed access to Ekiti State, which under law, electoral campaigns were supposed to stop 24 hours before the election. The mega rally was on Thursday before the Saturday election. There's a lot about alleged infringement on human rights. What impact do you think that would have on the result of the election?
Amici was stopped from coming in, and some other governors,
Oshomole
was stopped. They are not registered voters in Ekiti. Okay? So I don't know what. Fine, maybe for support, but I don't know how stopping them would influence the votes.
But as a lawyer, we're talking about alleged infringement on human rights. Isn't that a cause for concern?
Who's
especially
right?
when we talk about a process and a reform ongoing.
Who's right? If Amici's right was infringed, the Amici has a right to go to court. That is not a basis for going to electoral tribunal. That the fellow governor was not allowed in. I mean, we could come up with something better.
It was also alleged that on the eve of the
I don't know if
election,
I've answered your question, but seriously, that the fellow governor was not allowed in and that affected your result. What was he bringing in? I don't know. I don't know. Seriously, I don't know. So except there was something he was bringing in that would have made a difference, I don't want to go into specifics. But I mean, if anybody's right was breached, it was the person coming in. He wasn't allowed in. Fine, you have a right to move freely.
but these people are stakeholders of the APC.
Stakeholder.
For instance, it was also alleged that on the eve of the election, as well as during the elections, certain people, APC leaders and supporters across Ekiti State, were illegally, allegedly arrested. What is the position of the law?
I know the commissioner that was arrested.
The Commissioner of Finance, as well as the Director General.
And they brought charges of terrorism against them. I think they were brought to court almost immediately.
No, that's a different case. The Commissioner of Finance of Ekiti State, as well as the Director General of the Kayode Fayemi campaign organization, were allegedly arrested on the eve of the election, alongside some other people. But beyond all of that, what's the position of the law as regards police investigation, starting with an arrest in Nigeria?
Well, arrest, if the police has a right to arrest once they have an inkling, according to the law, under the criminal code or most of the laws, basically, even the Police Act says that once they have a reasonable ground to suspect that something is going wrong or somebody has done wrong, they can go ahead and arrest. But fine, it must be with a warrant. But even in some cases, the law permits that you may not arrest with a warrant, where maybe because of exigencies and all that, but basically, the police can go ahead and make arrests on suspicion of something going wrong. So if they had suspected that something was wrong, I think, well, it's within the powers of the police to arrest. Now then, if the people who were arrested felt the whole arrest was a sham, or it was wrong, or it was politically motivated, I think the courts are there. Well, let's not play the ostrich here. We know what goes on during election. The center, which was controlled largely by PDP, tried to bring in their weight and influence what went on in Ekiti during the period. And it was obvious, because some of the PDP guys were around. I mean, the minister, even the APC said it. The Minister of State for Defense, Obani Koro, was on ground. And I think the Minister for Police Affairs too. I felt there were too many government functionaries on ground. But if, according to them, is to make sure that peace reigned, which we all saw there was no violent, very unlike past elections. Well, I think they've done well for themselves.
Let me read an excerpt for you from Lai Mohammed. He said, "We encourage our leaders and supporters who were arrested, harassed and intimidated to seek the enforcement of their rights." Now, in what best way can the law, as it is now in Nigeria, enforce their rights?
Now, you could enforce your right by going to court if you feel your right was infringed, if unlawful arrest, unlawful detention. The law says that nobody can be detained for more than 24 hours. You have to be charged to court or allowed to go and come back. Sincerely, I have a lot of regard for the APC. But what they're trying to bring up to the election petition tribunal, well, I don't want to say much, but I think they can look for something better than some of these things. For the mental right of supporters were breached, the court is there. It's not the tribunal that is going to look into your right being breached. You are a citizen of Nigeria. You have a right to go to court once your right has been infringed upon. So those kind of things don't bother on election. I said, well, fine. Maybe it was prelude to the election, but I don't think that will be a ground for going to the tribunal.
How would you describe the role of the judiciary in all of this? Because we're looking towards an electoral system that will be fair to all. Some have said the Ekiti election is free but not fair. We're looking at a situation in Nigeria where people's rights won't be trampled upon. Do you see judiciary playing a critical role in what happened in Ekiti?
Until the issues are brought before the court, we cannot say that the judiciary hasn't done anything serious. He said, I mean, from what you read, that those whose rights were breached, they should go to court. Beautiful. If you didn't go to court, you slept on your right. The court will not come into your house and say, we heard you were in Ekiti. No, 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 no. You have to come to the court. Then the court will look at it. If your case has merit, then you can rest assured you would have that. But if they didn't go to court, then you can't say the judiciary hasn't done anything much. But until they do that, then their right is in abeyance.
Militarization of the election process is one of the constitutional breaches that was alleged by the APC. The former interim national chairman of the APC, Chief Bisi Akonde, said that, and I want to quote him now, that the massive deployment of soldiers, police and the SSS for the election amounted to shutting down of the state, which is unknown to our constitution. Is there any constitutional limitation to the involvement of the military in elections under the civilian rule?
Well, the military is under the president. It's a GOC. And we already have a volatile situation. And looking at history, things have gone wrong. I mean, we remember the Wild Wild West and all this thing and how everything went bad in previous regimes. So I think the president was just trying to prevent same. We already have a volatile situation, bombs going up here and there. So if they feel that the military will provide adequate security, I don't see any problem deploying military.
Does the Constitution see any problem with that?
Constitution?
As it is.
The army is under the president. If he feels there's need to put them on ground to safeguard, the bottom line is the security of the citizens and their properties. So they deployed the military and it worked fine. Brilliant.
At what point can military presence be described as military intimidation?
My brother, opposition, if they had won, if the incumbent had won, I don't think we will be saying all this. So it's natural for politicians to cry wolf where there's none. All right, so I don't see any form of intimidation. All they've said is that some of our people were not allowed in, their own people were on ground. Did that affect the result? How can you prove it? Until they come up with claims that, okay, fine, the military presence did not allow our people to come out. If maybe we had in a local government, you had PDP 10,000, APC 0, then you know that something happened, but when you have 10,000, then 9,500 of your people came out, and you say military presence, were they coming out to fight the military or what? I mean, no, we could come up with better things.
Beyond elections now, let's just take a very brief one from the Ekiti election. To what extent can can the Nigerian military be involved under the civilian rule, vis-a-vis the rule of the Nigerian police? At times, the local parlance, they will tell you that when a soldier man slaps you, then you understand that the police is your friend. And does the Constitution allow the free-for-all involvement of the Nigerian military under a civilian rule?
Well, let's look at it from this point. What's the primary function of the army? To defend the territory against external, and internal invasion, as it were. Now, so I feel, really, I understand where you're coming from. Some people have said, in some quarters, they said, now you're inviting the military. By the time they see this thing and they get interested and they take over, you went to call them from the barracks. But I think what the authority have said is that it's to protect life. I mean, there were 3 AIGs, I guess, on ground that day. Then they felt, okay, military presence. Anything can happen in an election. And if it goes haywire, everybody would have said, why didn't you bring in the military? Why didn't you put enough security? I mean, we have the Chibok on one side. And they were like, the military wasn't quickly brought in, this wasn't done. So I think to prevent such comments. Now, the election was a one-day thing. They brought in the military. I don't think they're saying it. They've gone. All right. So even in day-to-day living, let's go outside Nigeria and look at America. There are instances where when things go out of hand, the president has a right to bring in the military. And they have certain parts of their constitution that they can invoke and actually bring in the military to come and take it, as long as it's to protect life and property, security of life and property. The government or the president has a right to invoke his powers and bring in the military into the situation, but not for intimidation. So I guess if the opposition can actually substantiate their claim on intimidation, fine. But if not, if it's just because they lost an election and they feel because the military if they had won, would they have come up with the same thing? That's my own position.
Most elections that have been won in courts in our recent history in Nigeria have not been won at the tribunals. It's either that the judgment at the tribunal is challenged at a court of appeal or at other higher courts. What does that portend for the Nigerian tribunals, election petition tribunals in Nigeria?
With all due respect to those in charge of the tribunals, everything is based on the evidence available to them at that point. And I know the composition of most tribunals are seasoned judges. And if the evidence in front of them says a particular thing, they have no other right or they have no other powers or anything. They cannot decide against what has been put in front of them. So that's the thing now. But that's the essence of appeal.
In a situation whereby a tribunal says you didn't win and then you appeal it and possibly maybe at the Supreme Court you finally won, does that not tell that probably the judiciary was somehow compromised?
I don't want to believe so. I don't want to believe so. I'm not trying to support or protect my people, but I think it's based on what was available to them at the point where the case was still before them. You can't just make a comment in a vacuum, except there are evidences to show that there's been some form of compromise. But if that was not proven, that the fact that, okay, something was won at a higher level, I mean, we all go before the court. Sometimes you win at the lower court, you go to the Court of Appeal, the decision is upturned, then you go to the Supreme Court. So do we now infer the same thing, that the composition of the lower court is bad? No. So it depends. They just feel that, okay, this is the process. So let's follow the process as it is. So if it happens in commercial cases, why would political cases be different? It's just the same thing. There are a lot of judgments that are upturned at Court of Appeal level, then you get to the Supreme Court, or the same applies to the lower level too. You get a judgment, it favors a particular party, then you go up and higher, and the next thing you just find out that the thing has been turned against you.
Kayode Fayemi spent close to 3 years in court before he finally could claim his mandate. What is wrong with this slow pace of judgment? What do you think is responsible for that in Nigeria?
Our system is a systemic thing. I think that's one of the reasons why they had to amend the electoral laws that it must be within certain days. It was as a result of that. In fact, you find out that in some cases, some people will still be in court and another election has almost taken place. That's why you find out that there's a lot of activities going on. Everybody's aware. It's the law, so they had to find, those things, democracy is still emerging. So as these things happen, then people think, and the authorities also look into those things and they do the necessary amendment. With this one now, we've seen better results and all that, because I think one of the reasons that brought about that was because they found that, lawyers, people feel the longer you stay in court, the more your clients will appreciate you and the more money they will want to pay. But now that I know that I have a limited time to stay, I will have to brazen up and possibly hurry up and look for things. Fine. That may have its own adverse effect too, which means that there are some things that may take time to gather. You will go in a hurry and go and do some things. But I think if you look at what is happening, the authority have seen that it's a dynamic society. Our democracy is still emerging. So that's why they've come up with that thing. And I think it's been working fine.
Would you say that it is a challenge of a system or the personnel involved in that system?
The system makes the personnel.
What would think that the personnel can also impact on the system?
Let me even give you this example as an aside. If you have a case and you walk up to the other party and you settle with them, the client don't see that you've done serious work. So, and that impacts on how you will be paid. They just say, you've spoken to them, everything, so that, let's go, let's just give you some. But if you elongate the process, you come back and tell them, fine, it's not the best practice. All right, but this is the system in which we operate. It applies even, let's look at it from another angle. Somebody comes to your house to fix your generator. He goes to the gen, he does one or two magic, and he just says, and the thing starts working. Something you battle with for 2 days. Fine, you forget the 2 days and look at, what did he do? Let me just pay him something and go. So I think that's one of the reasons why some
that's what lawyers do in Nigeria.
I didn't say that what lawyers do. That impacts, is the system impacting on the personnel. All right, but I feel that with reforms here and there, things will change for the better. And also people will come to appreciate what you do and how you do it. That speed does not necessarily mean I haven't done much. Particularly when I get something in your favor, then it should be appreciated rather than you allowing me to prolong it. I'm not saying that's what lawyers do, but we've seen that also in the practice. In fact, somebody was telling me over the week that the only set of people who make their money fast are doctors. If you don't pay, you will die. But with lawyers, it's a different thing. You want to drag your feet. When do we pay? Has he done something substantial? Is he going in our favor? So you two will want to look at how you can actually, expand and elongate the thing so it will look like, hey, I'm working. Can you see? So that's still the kind of society in which we operate.
So right, we're rounding up there. Let's just have your personal legal opinion. The alleged 8 constitutional breaches that APC is challenging in the court as regards the Ekiti election. Do you see all of these have any impact on the result of the governorship election in Ekiti?
I want to reserve my comment on that, but seriously, I think they should go and look at other states and try and tidy up their acts. This one is gone. Except you just want to make noise so it won't look like, oh, they didn't see us or something, but I don't think so. I don't see, those are constitutional breaches, quite all right, which can be taken to the regular court, but not, you're taking this. Yes, I told you earlier on about substantial compliance. Even the people of the state, everything has been going peacefully, and I think you don't just go to court for the sake of going to court or for academic exercise. It's not, they're just on a frolic of their own. But the 8 points, I read them, I tried to look at it, I looked at it in relation to the electoral laws. There's no bearing.
Do you see it impacting and shaping the electoral system on the path of getting better in subsequent elections, especially in the area of infringing on fundamental human rights?
Well, okay, fine. One of the things they said was that for future elections and to assert the rights of the people, fine, I think it's good. You go to court for that, brilliant, but not the electoral petition tribunal.
Thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much.
And that's it on this week edition of Judiciary Today. Do join us again same time next week only on Core TV News. I am Nifemi Oguntoye. Thanks for being there.